Hi, everybody, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of the Survivor 50 preseason. My name is Mike Bloom, and I am back telling you what you need to know about one of the members of the cast of Survivor 50. And today, they say everything's bigger in Texas, and we've got a big one for you because we are talking about one of the OG fan favorite characters, one of the most foundational heroes we have seen in his heyday back in Survivor history, in Colby Donaldson, returning for a fourth time, rather surprisingly. But look, Superman was just in theaters, whether he be in a fat suit or not. We will believe this man could fly to Fiji, and we'll talk about how he might do on this fourth time out, as we've got a bit of a bite-sized podcast about the man who ain't no Hershey bar. Now, of course, I am not alone here. I woke up this morning and I thanked God for two things: that I'm alive and that I got to podcast with Mary Kwiatkowski about Colby Donaldson.
Woo! Yeah, I'm here with my white cowboy hat on and my Texas hand towel hanging in the background because I don't have a flag. But close enough,
Wait,
right?
so it's a hand towel that just has the state of Texas on it?
It says bless your heart.
Oh, yeah, because for those who don't know, back in the early days, each castaway was permitted a luxury item, something from home they could bring as sort of a creature comfort. And Colby brought a big ass Texas flag that then doubled as a makeshift tarp for every tribe that he lived with in Australia.
Yes, exactly. And it ended up being like a pretty useful item because it was basically a tarp that they had. They had to eventually give that up later on when Jeff said that. Or was that an All Star? I don't know. I might be mixing memories, but he brought the flag at least twice.
All right. Well, let's wave the flag for Colby here because, again, it's kind of odd to talk about Colby's legacy to either a newer fan or someone who, like, found Survivor by watching Heroes versus Villains on Netflix and saw very specifically that version of Colby.
Yes.
Colby fever was running rampant in America in the year 2001, Mary. How many kids named their children after Colby Donaldson?
So many, so many. Like kids, dogs,
Mhm.
the the thing that's, like, hard to quantify for newer fans of not just Survivor, but reality TV in general, is how big Survivor was in its first couple seasons, particularly season 2, because it was a lot of people were, like, found out about it in season 1 and then told their friends, and their friends were all like, "Okay, I'll watch the 2nd season." I
Yeah.
know for myself, season 2 was the first full season that I watched. I caught the very end of season 1, and Lil Kid Mary was definitely on the Colby train for so long that, like a lot of people who watched it when they were young, it took me years to look back and be like, "Oh, Colby didn't win that season. I thought he did," because that was definitely ingrained in a lot of our memories. It is the only season of the US Survivor to have lasted more than 39 days,
Yep.
was a big thing they did. It was really also, I mean, early seasons, but, like, really in that time of new locations. We're traveling around. This is the Australian outback, and Colby was like the epitome of all American hero type on the show.
Yeah, which is pretty wild because certainly Borneo had its heroes, right? The underdog, Pagong grouping, Rudy Bosch, sort of like a fan favorite. But I will say that Colby did feel like the first out and out survivor hero. I mean, this was a guy with the looks of Captain America who had that rustic look, who was, charming and funny and an incredible physical threat. And so, yeah, it is really interesting in retrospect, as we'll get into with his game, that he ends up not winning at the end of the
Yeah.
day and has not won. So, I guess as we jump from the distant past into the present for a second, Mary, what was your reaction to finding out that after more than 15 years away from Survivor, Colby was actually going to come back for time number 4?
I think nobody was surprised when he came back the first 2 times. I was very surprised when he came back this time. And I was
Mhm.
surprised for 2 reasons. One being the Jeff Probst of it all. For those who were kind of in the know for the first 2 times he was brought back, Colby was close with Jeff Probst. They were like buds. Like this was one of Jeff's favorites, and so it made sense that he kept getting brought back and stuff. From the perspective of the viewer watching on his third time out in Heroes versus Villains, it feels like that relationship soured a little bit for whatever reason. And it also, and then the second reason I was surprised, it seemed like Colby didn't have a good time. It seemed like
Yeah.
Colby wasn't into it, didn't have a good time, didn't really care about the season and the show. And that's why I was surprised. Now, I think we've heard a lot since his casting about why he's coming back, and we can talk about that a little bit. But my initial reaction was, wow, I'm surprised that he wanted to be there, and I'm surprised that the show wanted to cast him.
Yeah, I mean, the Heroes versus Villains reunion, one of the last things we had heard Colby say up to this point was him talking about like how he felt roped in compared to the Australian outback. He could wander wherever he wanted to, and the camera crews were followed him. Here, he was limited to a specific amount of space. The first episode of Heroes versus Villains, he looks to another person and is like, I don't know who some of these people are. And look, that experience might carry over into the next time out, but just to underline something that you mentioned, something that is highlighted in Brandon's interview with Tina Wesson, and something that, without getting into too many details, Colby himself expressed to me when I was out there on the island with him, is that one of the primary reasons why he came back is because of how that last time ended. Colby, again, Survivor is incredibly important to him. It gave him a career in entertainment. It changed his life. He does not want to end his story on that note. And we'll get into what that note was in terms of Heroes versus Villains, but it's odd to say that like he's looking for redemption, considering again, this was one of the original golden boys of the series, but like it's something that's been gnawing away at him for the better part of a decade and a half. And so as odd as it is to see him come back, considering how miserable he seemed to be on and off the island, seems to be a very changed mindset for Colby this time around.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I understand that redemption, especially when understanding that, let's see, when Colby is now 51 years old. When he was first on the show, he was, I guess, in his early 20s.
I'll give you something here, Mary.
Yeah.
Colby was at the age that Rizzo is right now.
Right. Okay. So
when
that's,
he first played Survivor.
That's fun context. So yeah, Colby was 26 years old when he was first on. And oh wow, the Wikipedia even tells you their luxury items. That's so fun. So now being 51, I can totally understand the perspective of like, wow, I had such a good thing going, and then when I've left this part of my life on like kind of a sour note because of whatever mindset I was in, and now in my second half of life or whatever, that I feel like I want to change the perspective on that. I want to tie a better bow, even if Colby comes on and is like first out, but he has like a real, oh, this was just great being back here, I feel like that would almost turn the tide. So yeah, I feel like this is going to be interesting for him. From everything I've heard from Tina and from other people talking about Colby, he has approached this season differently than he did Survivor Heroes versus Villains. There was a lot on Survivor Heroes versus Villains of Colby going around being like, do you know who that person is? Who's that? What's happening? Which is wild considering there were only 20 seasons at that time. Now there's 50 seasons. And I don't think that Colby has like become a Survivor historian or anything like that. But I do think that he's probably going to have at least done a little bit more of his research. I think it would be irresponsible for most people to come back to Survivor on season 50 and not have at least watched a few seasons from the 40s to understand what the game is now. Because people in season 20 were talking about how the game had changed.
Right.
It's night and day from 20 at this point.
Well, as much as Colby was asking people who are these others, let's ask ourselves, who is Colby Donaldson? Mary, it's a lot of game to sum up, particularly when it comes from the Australia aspect. But to your best ability, what is the story of Colby Donaldson so far in Survivor?
Yeah, so Colby, starting in season 2, we mentioned that he was kind of like the all-American hero, and he was very much like the tribe provider, the steady guy, good outdoorsman, and also really, really shown in the challenges. He won, I think, 5
So yeah,
individual challenges.
he's set the record that has yet to be broken. As an even more astounding stat, the last 10 challenges of the season, individual challenges, he won 8 of them.
Yeah.
He won 80% of the end game.
Wild. Yeah, total challenge wins, including non-individual ones, 12 for the Australian Outback, which is just like amazing. So he was really a backbone of his tribe. He also uh, did something that we've seen more of in other seasons, where we kind of have the like younger guy, slightly older woman relationship, and he perfected that really well with Tina. And then, of course, to kind of tie up his season at the end, he I think was probably weighing like what is going to be best for my career moving forward and what's going to make me look like the goodest boy, right? And took Tina to the end, who was his closer ally, and she ends up winning. People say that was a really bad, obviously game losing decision. If he had taken Keith instead, things would have been different. But yeah, he voted Keith out at the final three, took Tina to the end. This was at a time when the final three person just chose who to go at the end with. Can't imagine, right? So different from nowadays.
We get that to a certain extent in fire making, right? Where the immunity winner chooses who they sit at the end, but there's just one more
I
person
guess.
on there.
Yeah. So and that really cemented him as both being like, oh, he's even like above the game. He didn't even really care about winning. He just wanted to be loyal. So he definitely did have like a bit of that kind of loyal, honesty, integrity thing about him as well. But if you look at him on his return appearances, Colby has also had a sort of, I don't know, grumpy side to him, like a grumpy, kind of snarky side, which you even see a little bit in his first season when it comes to Jerry. We'll have to mention here, notably, this will be his first time returning to Survivor without his frenemy,
Yes.
Jerry Manthe, which I know a lot of us, myself included, are very sad about. We could bring back 3 people from season 48, but only one from Australia not back. I don't know. Feel like we could have done 2. Yeah, so he definitely has had his ups and downs when it comes to working with people who want to, I don't know, objectify him. He had like a similar scenario kind of in season 20 when it came to Sugar. I remember. I mean, these are apples and oranges with comparing Sugar and Jerry, but yeah, he's
Sugar and spice.
Yeah, exactly. But he did make, while not as far of a run in All Stars, was still like really kind of in that same like competitive team player kind of thing. He's also been one of the people on the show, which is a lot of old school players of like, I'm here for the experience, I'm here for the adventure,
which is interesting because it kind of comes around full circle, right? To one of the main complaints about casting in the new era.
Right. And then when we come back to his third appearance there on Heroes versus Villains, we kind of mentioned it. He comes in and Heroes versus Villains, it wasn't even that old. People were acting like he was like an old man on Heroes versus Villains, but he was 35? Yeah, 35 years old. So, Mike, how does that make you feel? That people are calling him Superman in a fat suit.
I mean, listen,
like the old man Colby.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a rite of passage. When I turned 35, Coach barged into my house and frog marched me across the sand, much like he did with Colby. I think that was really the point, was like, Colby, again, was considered one of the greatest challenge competitors of all time, set a record that has not been broken, and immediately gets defenestrated by a man who non-ironically calls himself the Dragon Slayer. And that was sort of like, I think, emblematic of the way Colby was viewed. Like, this really was, not to say it was like a old school calling the way Winners of War was, but I think there certainly was this motto of like, the people who were left out on the OG Heroes early on were Colby and Stephanie and Tom, these players that were kind of professing this like loyal to the soil, let's grab our group and run it to the end mentality. They were sort of being eschewed on the outside, which is not something Colby is used to.
Yeah, and even looking at his interview when he was going on Heroes versus Villains, and people asked, why did you come back? And his answer was, it's about the extreme challenge in the epic adventure, which I think is why he was upset, because at that point in time, Heroes versus Villains was even then more about the gameplay, the kind of showmanship of the game and the strategy. And if you look at, even being only season 20, that's when we have the era of like Russell Hantz coming into the game, lots of idols, advantages, talk of that kind of thing. And Colby just really didn't fit in anymore with a lot of that mindset. And yeah, he did not perform particularly well in any of the challenges. Um, he had a famous moment where they had like a loved ones reward where his brother came and he was just
Really?
yelling at his his
I mean,
brother.
he is the Donaldson family has been well represented in Survivor, considering that the first time he won one of the first like Survivor
Oh,
loved ones visits
I
in his
forgot about that.
mother, Day
Yeah.
Donaldson. He won an overnight trip with her in a Pontiac Aztec, and there's a rather oddly lascivious scene of like her sipping coffee plaintively and watching him shower.
Yeah. I mean, look, people were not given enough PR training when going on these shows back in the day. It was weird at the time. It's still weird, but whatever. But yeah, I will never forget him yelling at his brother, "Damn it, Reed!" when the two of them could not communicate well during one of these loved ones challenges. Uh, yeah, he kind of sat back and like coasted through the latter half of that game. He actually got very close to winning, surprisingly, in Heroes versus Villains. Um, he made it down toward the end, and if he had ended up getting to the final three, it's relatively likely, looking at that jury, that he possibly could have won,
Yeah.
depending on who he's against.
I think he would have
Um,
gotten the heroes and maybe Jerry, depending on who he's sitting next to if she's on the jury,
yeah,
which would have given him, there were 9 people and 5 would have been enough.
I think it would have been interesting if you had like a final of Sandra, Russell, and Colby, of like how that would have gone down or something. But regardless, he ends up coming in fifth place. And the things I think about from him is the contrast between his kind of motto in some of those early seasons being like, the only way I know how to do anything is full tilt, like that kind of thing, compared to when he's in Survivor 20 and he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna sit back and let everybody else eat each
I
other.
I was
And
just watching Treasure Island.
yeah, yeah, exactly. He acted in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the challenges, in terms of the strategy, in terms of getting to know each other, just as kind of like, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and I'm not going to participate in the stuff I don't know. And I'm just going to, yeah. So,
All right. Well, let's get some numbers from Colby. They did a fantastic job highlighting that, Mary, highlighting his 98 days. If Colby basically makes it past the first tribal council, he will hit the century mark. I think partially due to the fact that he did last all 42 days in the Australian outback. But as you mentioned, age 51 from Australia, All Stars, Heroes versus Villains, placed second, 12th, 5th. Ironically enough, we mentioned coach before, the exact mirrored placements as coach. He has won 17 challenges in the pre-merge across his Survivor career and 9 individual challenges, including once again those big 8 wins in Australia, and has received 20 votes against him. In which definitely not helped along by the fact that at the merge of Australia, he is the target of the Kucha tribe as like a big ploy to get them to fall for a bait in terms of like a tiebreaker situation that was happening. I mean, I want to go back to Australia here, Mary, because I think there's a lot of very prescient material in like the way we left Colby before
mhm.
this, but I think rebut the idea that some people are espousing of like, oh well, Colby doesn't play the game, because I think Colby has the capacity to do so within his own sort of boundaries that he sets. Ironically enough, for someone who complained about the boundaries being set up at camp in Heroes versus Villains, because when I think of like a Colby move, I go back to actually episode 4 of Survivor the Australian Outback, where basically the tribe dynamic was that there were 4 hot young people that were in an alliance together. It was Colby, it was Jerry, it was Mrs. Boston Rob herself, Amber, Burkich, and Mitchell. And then there were 2 outsiders in Keith and Tina. They were going to tribal council. Keith was an easy vote. He was not necessarily getting along with everybody. Apparently, he was mishandling the rice. But Colby was beginning to get a little uncomfortable with his position. He was not necessarily loving Jerry. He was one of the many people whose nerves she was getting on, and he began to see some value in Keith as well. And so it's kind of wild in retrospect, but the story is that on the walk from camp to tribal council, Colby pulls Tina to the side and is like, I want to make a move. I want to flip. And he does. He ties the vote up. What you think would be a 5-1 vote or even a 4-2 vote becomes 3-3. He deadlocks the vote essentially, and Mitchell ends up going home due to a tiebreaker at the time of previous votes against them in previous episodes of and tribal councils that they've been to. And so that's the alliance that Colby then really locks in with towards the end. I was watching actually a video of like all of their voting confessionals in Australia, and like it does seem like until after that happens, a lot of Colby's voting confessionals are like, so sorry I have to do this. This was a plan that we locked in from the very beginning. So again, it's interesting in that I think he has somewhat of a flexibility to be able to operate in a way that's like, I see a better opening for myself, so let me take it. But he's not going to be so entirely flexible, at least from what we've seen so far, as to be like, I'm going to be flipping on these people left and right. He'll make a move if he feels like he needs to, but if he feels comfortable with the group that he's in, he's ready to ride that horse.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually really interesting thinking about kind of the dynamic that you spelled out on that vote where he's with this younger group and then sees a little bit more. I don't know if it's that he feels like Tina and Keith were more steady. I do think a lot of his thought processes were more about like who is helping around camp, who is, you know, helping in challenges, who is whatever. I don't know that Colby ever, I could be misremembering, but I don't know that he ever like spoke to the camera and said, "I think I could beat these people, and that's why I'm bringing them along." I don't know that that is so much his mindset in especially the early days. Not to say that he never thinks that way, but even in All Stars and then Heroes versus Villains, a lot of times when we see him talk about the people he wants to align with, it's either because they have challenge strength or they're easy to get along with around camp, and then vice versa, the people he usually wants to get out. He mentions a lot that this person is annoying me, and that's why he wants them out. So I don't know if his opinion on that is going to have changed for season 50 and he's going to think a little more strategically, or if he's going to stay kind of with the type of people that he's comfortable with.
Let's talk about the decision he made at the end game of Australia,
Mhm.
because as you mentioned, it has still been regarded over 25 years of Survivor as one of the worst moves made in the show's history, where it was these two paths laid in front of him, right? Basically, like take Keith and have a slam dunk victory, essentially. Nobody really liked or respected Keith, or take Tina and make the path that much harder for you. And I think it needs to be said sort of what the meta around the show was at the time. It's weird to say meta because it was only season 2 of Survivor, but there was so much around the idea of alliances being evil in
Yeah.
the wake of Survivor season 1. And I will give Tina Wesson so much credit, as I want to do, because she was able to weaponize this narrative to her advantage, where allegedly, like the entire season, she was telling everybody, like, we have to make sure the good people win this time. Because again, as much as people may have respected Richard Hatch, especially in retrospect, his game certainly was not liked. And so she was really trying to beat the drum of like, let's not beat them. Let's make sure that the good, honest people make their way to the end. And Colby very much shared that opinion. There is also the meta, as you mentioned, of the fact that at the time, Survivor was like low key a pipeline to superstardom. Now,
Yeah.
that was not intended upon the show being first created, but looking at all the different pathways that the 16 castaways in Borneo would take, Colby, who I think was looking to break into the entertainment world, was perhaps thinking on more of a long term perspective of like, I do not want to be immediately villainized by people because that might impact. If I'm supposed to be the good natured all American boy next door, great. That will get me a lot more work in retrospect than being $1 million richer, but losing out on future work. And listen, he has worked. He has hosted, Top Shot for a good number of years. That butchery show that I forget about. He did commercials for the Shit Quattro. He was in Red Eye. He was in Joey. He was in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like he tried to break into Hollywood as much as he could. And also, for what it's worth, yes, Colby would have won resoundingly against Keith. He did almost win, even
Mhm.
against Tina. He did lose by a 4-3 vote. Though, of course, the other side of that is that the very important vote that he lost, that arguably lost him the game, was Jerry, whose
Yeah.
relationship he completely mismanaged.
Oh yeah. Just one more thing about Australia.
Mm,
It really it can't even be like described at the time like how big and respected a lot of these players were, to the point where this is a pre 9/11 world, and these people were looked at like heroes, like survivors, like reality TV, especially on Survivor, was not treated the same way it is now. Like these were, wow, look at these people going out and roughing it and building a society and, filming it and that kind of thing. It was just different. So it's kind of hard to like relate that to current day Survivor, but I do think that that factored into a lot of this kind of talk about like we're the good people and where is this going to go. I think bottom line, I think Colby thought he could beat Tina either way, but thought I'd rather bring Tina, and if I'm going to lose to someone, I would rather lose to Tina.
mm.
Um, but yeah, he did almost win. He did mismanage the relationship with Jerry, and I think that that type of mismanaging of relationships in general is something we've seen in all of Colby's seasons. I mentioned Sugar, also his relationship with Amanda. He mismanaged with the whole watching Treasure Island or whatever thing. Like there have been times where I think people want him to stick up for them or to be on his side, and he kind of doesn't spare their feelings when it comes to like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. Like you're not my priority here at the moment.
Yeah,
So
I would say if Colby had a biggest weakness coming into this, besides perhaps like, lack of knowledge or minimal knowledge about the modern day game, it would be that Colby has a bit of like an emotional volatility to him.
mhm.
Sometimes, I mean, as you said, he was in a bit of a bad place in Heroes versus Villains in general, but like you see how much his relationship with Jeff had fallen when we have this weird moment where like Jeff offers the players portions of a Snicker bar to sample what the reward is, and like Colby outright refuses. It has this kind of stank look on his face. It is like, let's just get to the challenge. And Jeff's like, I'll say when we're ready, Donaldson. Okay. But I do think that Colby sometimes can get a little, persnickety. I mean, I think he's a very funny guy, can be a very charming guy. But I even look to like all Stars, for instance. There's one moment when during the Richard Hatch Tribal Council, I think he's like talking about how he feels some players are coasting, and he like
Mhm.
particularly outlined Sheehan, I think, and like that brazen honesty, I think could be seen as a major strength. I think especially in a game that is hopefully as fluid as Survivor 50 hopes to be, that like he is kind of a steady rock that the current can kind of flow around of like, okay, well, we know that Colby's going to say the way he's voting and will probably stick that way. I think that could really help him in terms of like bringing him forward as a number. I think unfortunately what can also happen is like if he is steadfast in those opinions and he is want to express them, that can sometimes kind of jut up against other people and maybe make them want to work with him less.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting looking at kind of his voting history and other things where we've mentioned this many times, but he very rarely, if ever, votes for someone because he thinks that they are a bigger like physical threat or strategic threat or whatever. He usually votes for people either because he feels like they don't deserve to be there, or they're annoying, or they're not contributing, or they're not helping him in his, or they're not in his alliance or whatever. But which is interesting because the reasons he has received votes have been things like feeling like, especially in All Stars, like he could be a physical threat.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, he does have a little bit of a rigidity to him that I think he could benefit most from trying to be a little more flexible and trying to be more adaptive.
Well, let's talk about the people that might stretch him out then, might
Yeah.
make him a little more flexible. Let's talk about the cast here. Now, Colby has, even though he comes all the way back from season 2 and hasn't played since 20, he does have a few connections here. I want to start with the strongest one. I
Hmm.
mean, he's gotta pick up from where he left off with Stephanie, right? They spent
I would
very
think
little
so.
time together on the island in Heroes versus Villains, but like they were locked in together alongside Tom. I have to imagine, especially if they're sort of pursuing the game both through a similar lens as to how they left it, they're gonna be thick as thieves once more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there is a bit of similarity in both of their gameplay styles. It made sense at the time in Heroes versus Villains why they connected. And I think that I can't see a lot of reasons why they wouldn't connect again. Um, Stephanie and Colby share a lot of that like physicality and kind of like I mean it seems dumb to say like the old school mindset because like of course they were old school players, but they really do embody a lot of that gameplay. um I'm trying to think if Stephanie, the one difference is that because Stephanie has played on some other
Mm.
reality shows since then, I think that she could have possibly learned a little bit more about some of the more strategic game moves, and that might be a good thing for her to inform Colby of and like work with him on. So as long as he's open to that, that basically the absolute worst case scenario would be that Colby comes in and sees Stephanie and Stephanie's trying to be more strategic and he's like, "Ah, this isn't the Stephanie I know." Like that would be the only thing that I could see going wrong there. I don't think that would happen.
Well, one of the people that Stephanie has been playing alongside with in some of those non-survivor shows is Suri,
Yeah.
who was also on the Heroes Beach with Colby, and who Colby low-key played a hand in eliminating in the only time so far that she has been voted out pre-merge. Colby and Tom were on the bottom. JT took advantage of them to split the vote. An idol was played, and he flipped on them, with them, I should say, in the revote to take her out. I would imagine Suri has sort of like let bygones be bygones, but do you think there's any sort of weird dynamic between the two of them considering what happened last time?
So here's the problem is I want to just take all of these people that you have here on in the first, 1.5 rows and grab them and say, you can't let past issues be a problem. There are so few of you from the first 20 seasons even here that you need to let bygones be bygones. I will also say the Suri thing is one of the very few times where I do think Colby was concentrating a little bit more on his vote out of like trying to vote out a strategic threat. But if you actually look at it, quite a lot of the things he was saying at the time were also like, oh, she's sneaky or whatever, as opposed to saying like she's strategic and or it's just a little bit different there. Um, I think that they should they should work together. I don't know. I think the main problem here is that Cerie's got so many other options of people who are going to want to work with her, that she's going to want to work with. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Cerie's priority is going to be working with Colby.
How about Coach? We've mentioned this before, the proto heated rivalry moments between the two of them. They've had a limited amount of time together, I suppose, in Ponderosa in Heroes versus Villains, but obviously a smaller dynamic than the other two on the board. Do you think anything is going to brew between them? Do you think it's still stuck in Kobe's craw, what Coach was able to do to him?
Here's the problem is that I think if I'm trying to plan out for Colby, like who his allies need to be, and there's actually a lot of people from newer seasons that I think are who he needs to work with, but I think he needs to work with Coach, maybe Ozzy. I don't the three of them in this weird little triangle. I don't know that they're gonna all want to work together. They've got a lot of history there between Colby, Coach, and Ozzy, but I think that they all value physicality, they all value loyalty, they all value certain similar things that I think would benefit them, but they also clash in personality type, and that is a bigger issue. I think it's more likely that we're going to see more of a rivalry kind of situation there, but I think they should work together.
So you mentioned some possible new suitors for Colby, as is wont to do
Yes.
amongst these newer cast members. Who are you eyeballing right now?
I think the most obvious ones for Colby are going to be Jonathan and Joe. I think they
Mhm.
stand out pretty quickly. I would even potentially put Kyle in that mix. I think it wouldn't be a problem. I actually think that Colby. This might be a little bit shocking, a little bit kind of out of left field here. I think Colby and Chrissy could get along pretty well. I think
Mm.
they both have like a similar kind of directness or bluntness that we were talking about. I think that actually, if they could partner up, that would be a really good person for Colby to kind of lean on in terms of some strategic mindset. I think that we will probably see people like Joe and Jonathan want to pick Colby's brains. There might be a little bit of that kind of fandom happening there. So I think that that's kind of where he needs to land. He needs to, I hate to say this, he needs to build like a bro alliance with, Jonathan and Joe and Kyle and stuff like that. I think that would probably be like the place he needs to go. The only other real option there for him is to completely zig where everyone's expecting him to zag, and to work with a completely different type of player, and basically come in and say like, hey, I'll be a number for you, Savannah or whoever, and just try to be kind of in someone's corner who is not the type of person he would normally work with in the past.
I could actually see a Colby Rizzo connection going for a little bit, because I think that we saw Rizzo definitely play up the sort of parental role with Nate, much to his chagrin on the island. And I feel like Colby, maybe feels not necessarily like a fish out of water, but, he is one of now many parents on this cast. Like, I think he could honestly look at Rizzo and be like, listen, I was your age when I first played. Like, let me tell you some things about the way the world works. And I think that Rizzo would be receptive to it, if not for the fact that, like, this is a living legend of the game and he's having a conversation with me.
Rizzo was a completely different player to Cochran, but I could see a similar thing where Cochran was kind of feeding into Coach's ego a little bit, and also Phillips, and wanting to be like, oh yeah, let me wear your coat or whatever, like that kind of thing. Like, I think I could see a similar thing with Rizzo and Colby. I think in that relationship, Rizzo by far has the upper hand, but I think that that would be interesting. What do you see the potential Chrissy connection that I'm inventing in my brain?
Yeah, I could see. I mean, I think that Chrissy is a very grounded personality. And as we turn to like people that Colby might not like, as you mentioned, I think he is someone who definitely predicates a lot of his game upon interpersonal connections, chiefly like if you are a personality that is turning him off, he is turned off from voting alongside you. And so, like, I don't know if he'd want to work with Q. Like, I think that he or Angelina as a good example. And so I think Chrissy, who definitely has her moments where her personality shines, but I think is largely a very down-to-earth persona, that is the type of new face he would want to sort of glom onto.
Yeah, there's more people that I feel like it would be tricky for him to work with than I really see him connecting. But like, wouldn't it be interesting to be in a world where Colby is like working with Emily Flippin? I don't know, like that.
Yeah.
I think that one's one of those big toss-ups of if Emily is annoyed by Colby, then Emily's not working with Colby. So.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I think that we're all saying this, but like Colby is coming into this game with perhaps the most open mind that he has ever had in his Survivor career. So I think you made a really great point earlier in that, like, he may want to come in immediately and zag. He may be like, you think I'm going to work with these types of people, but no, I'm actually wanting to work with the D, with the Genevieve, with the Savannah, with the Camillas, and say, let's take out Jonathan. Let's take out Joe. I want to be that role in
which
the
would
alliance,
be his
them.
Probably smartest move if he did that. If he came in and was able to build this completely different coalition, and that's kind of like, that's sort of the dream of what you want. You really want to see the old era and the new era mixing and mingling, and people coming in. And Colby is someone who I think so many people are going to have a really, really firm idea of what kind of game he's going to play. Even if these players are not the most familiar with Colby, they're going to say, man in his 50s, played a long time ago, never won, used to be a challenge guy, and if that's his strongest suit, and it probably isn't his strongest suit anymore, what's he really bringing to the table? He's actually got a relatively low threat level because of that. He's not known for being the most strategic, and while known for being charismatic and good socially with a very specific type, that it would be really cool to see him try to flex that with someone else. The person that we haven't mentioned yet is Jenna, who is from season 1, and so
technically never played with Colby, but was on the same challenge sites as him, perhaps.
Sure, yeah. Technically, we're both on. Well, they were both on the All Stars, but they never were on the same. On the same beach. Jenna from All Stars, which was the last time we saw her, was not the kind of person who most wanted to team up with Colby. She had a big vendetta against winners, and while Colby wasn't a winner, he was also came in second place and was not the type that she would normally worked with. I think it's possible that they, at the very least, could give each other a sort of like nod. Hey, we're going to try to keep those of us from the single digit seasons in for as long as possible, kind of. So I think that is possible, but I don't know that it really behooves either of their games to like team up super closely. It's kind of crippling them as opposed to really helping them expand.
All right. Mary, I've got one final question for you, and it's a big one. 25 years after Colby made arguably a game-losing decision,
Yeah.
how will he win Survivor 50?
Yeah, he will win Survivor 50 if he comes in with a completely changed mindset and he comes in humble and willing to play very differently. And I think if he does that, I think the members of his alliance would probably gladly bring him deep into the game. I think if he knows how to make fire and could win a final for fire and then comes out at the end and gives a grand story about how it's been 25 years and the game has changed and so has he, and look how he's played differently, that's how he wins. I see him, if he wants to win, he's sitting in the end with Q. He's sitting in the end with Rizzo. He's sitting in the end with Pickle Winner so that they don't win again. He's in that spot. And the people in the game say, wow, we underestimated Colby and we thought that he was going to play the same game and we thought that he was going to be grumpy like he was in season 20, but look at this charming man who's come in and he's all smiles and he just had a great time, and don't we want this to be a full circle moment?
Yeah, well, regardless of how he does, I am so excited for this. Again, it was a surprise, but I will say again, after talking with him and also remembering that Colby is such a funny personality, like he is low key one of my favorite confessional givers
Mm-hmm.
in Survivor history. I mentioned it before, the I Ain't No Hershey bar, ifs and buts are candy and nuts. We'd all have a Merry Christmas. The infamous voting confessional for Jerry of, you hear that knock at your door? It's housekeeping. It's time for you to check out, which she then follows up on. Or even like the last confessional we see him give in Survivor up to this point, which is in Heroes versus Villains.
Oh yeah.
He's he's the dead man walking. He tells everybody, like, listen, good game, everybody. It was a lot of fun doing this with y'all. I'm done. And then he talks about doing this in confessional. He's like, so good, I damn near fooled myself. And then he takes like a pause as pregnant as Brenda Lowe in the Caramoan reunion and says, so that's when I made my move. Like, again, there's a reason why the man tried to break into the entertainment industry. He is a bit of a showman, and it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like he both tries to give off like, I'm just a good guy, I'm just here, nothing bigger than the game, and then at the same time is so clearly like scripted's not the right word. Like he's just very clearly trying to portray a version of like actory him, and that's
Polished.
the thing. Yes, polished, exactly. And that's the thing that I'm most interested to see if changes for now. Like at a time when I don't know if you know off the top of your head like what the most recent thing he's done in the industry has been, where he's in front of the camera. If it's been a little while, if there's, is he different? Is he not as polished? Is he knows that Survivor is not going to launch a new career for him at this point. So what is he really here for?
Yeah. Well, Mary, regardless, you're incredibly polished, as always, talking about Colby. Tough job to do, to also talk about the legacy of what he represented back in his heyday. But regardless, you have made me even more pumped to see that familiar cowboy hat, hopefully, back on our screens come February 25th. What would you like to plug for the listeners out there?
Well, the main thing I just want to, this is not exactly my plug, but if you are new to Colby, go look up some of his highlights, especially from the Australian Outback. I think it'll just be a fun either trip down memory lane or a look at what Survivor was like at that time, and compared to now. So that's one thing I would say. Otherwise, for myself, you can follow me everywhere at Frail Mary. Love is Blind is coming back in a little while. So once we're really in the swing of everything else going on in reality TV, who doesn't like a nice a nice dating show at the same time?
Yeah, go on a date to the Great Barrier Reef, maybe commit a felony or two.
Yeah, I think plenty of people over there would say that they definitely are Hershey bars. So, something different. But yeah, otherwise, I'm also doing some work with the Always Hold On to Smallville podcast. We mentioned Superman, so
Oh,
if you're interested in the Smallville Ultimate season and you want to hear about another show from the early 2000s, then you can check that out as well.
all right. Well, we're going to keep perusing the Survivor 50 candy store as next up we go from an icon of old school Survivor to an icon of new school Survivor. Dee Valladares, one of
Ooh.
3 winners on this season, arguably the most renowned, played one of the most dominant games in recent memory. Can she make it happen and make a 2-for-2 winner, joining that pantheon of absolute legends? We'll talk all about it next time. Until then, let us know your thoughts. Were you one of these OG Colby fans, a la Sherry Beetham, naming your kids after him? What are your thoughts about him coming back for a 4th time? Do you think he can be as flexible as we're espousing, or will this be a bit similar to the last time we saw him? Only time will tell, and I, for one, cannot wait. Thank you, Mary, so much for your fantastic insights. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.